Hello, voiceover friends. It is Ryder, the VO life coach. You've heard me as national brand voice for NASCAR, the professional bull riders, and of course, Ford trucks. And you are listening to the VO Life podcast. Now, pay attention.
This podcast was produced under the authority of the Podcast Police, who may or may not have investigated the host and guests prior to broadcasting. Any unlawful statements will be investigated further and persecuted to the fullest extent of the podcast law.
Hey, and welcome back. It is the VO Life. You have found us once again in either Apple World, Spotify World, or wherever you listen to your fine podcast. Today we're honored, doubly honored. Charles Coates is back with me. Hey, Charles.
Hey.
It's good to have you as usual. We have missed doing our four-way conversations with Jake and Alden, but we'll hopefully try to get those guys on with us some as well. But today we really want to be humbled by having Vince LeBica with us. Hey, Vince.
Hey, guys. How you doing? Thanks so much for having me on today.
Well, we are so glad you took some time out of your busy schedule, and I'm going to push it over to Charles because I had said on the podcast last week I might not be here or probably wouldn't be here, but I'm here. But Charles, I'm going to let you run with it, and let's get to know Vince.
Yeah, for sure. So actually you're the special guest today, Troy, because I thought I was going to be doing this by myself with Vince, so I'm glad you could be here too. I just wanted to say, so I had a whole intro ready for Vince. I'm going to go ahead and kind of talk about it real quick. On the show today, we have a person that I would say, if you had adjectives and words to describe him, for the bit that I've gotten to know Vince, this is a guy he's caring, number one. He's energetic. He's charismatic. He's one of those people that you're just like, man, that's just a cool dude. And I can't, I met Vince at One Voice for the first time. I had him in a class. I took a class of his that he had. And, one thing, Vince, that really struck me was, man, how much you support your people and how much
right.
you could really, you could see people and they care, but like when you really see someone and you really see them stop what they're doing, talk to somebody, even when I remember you were busy, you were on your way to do something and somebody had asked you a question and you literally stopped everything and you talked to them. I think it was probably for like 6 or 8 minutes. And it's just one of those things that, you're always in the optics of people, right? People are always looking even when you don't know it. And that is one thing that I saw that I was like, man, he's checking the good boxes in my box, in my heart and my brain. So I'm just happy that we could have you. I know you're super busy, but I'm just really, really excited to have you on here today so we can just talk and get to know you know about you some more and talk about some industry stuff too.
Love it, dude. Thanks so much, Charles. You're a sweet guy. And Dallas it's one of those conferences, just like any other conference. It's like, people are paying to be there. And I try to, if I'm going to make myself available for the weekend or for that time, I try to fully make myself available outside of the fact of like at my hotel, actually at the room, you know what I mean? But if I'm in the lobby or hanging, like I for sure always try to make a point to stop. And if someone has a question, that's why Charles, you took my classes, but I try to let people know that hey, approach me. Like if you think of something, just because it's not within the 3-hour segment that you paid to be here for, come up to me, talk to me. I'm totally approachable. And I know not all agents are like that, but I think it's important that people know that we're people too. Right.
Yeah.
It's I'm just a regular guy, So, but thank you so much for such the kind words and really excited to be here today and we can dig into the juice and talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. We can talk about rates, representation, pretty much anything you guys want to chat. So I'm here for it.
I think we should turn the clock back because I found out we had this commonality I didn't know we had. Vince has been a mortgage lender. And I was a real estate broker for 22 years. So,
way.
so I thought, hey, we'll just talk real estate for a while. But no, we better not do that because we'll lose listeners.
Yeah.
But what a fun topic right now for us in Tennessee, watching property values become what we used to go. Well, yeah, in California, a house would cost $400,000 for a starter home, and now they're that much here. That's crazy. It's just crazy how it's changed.
Truly,
but anyway,
nuts. Yeah, I am a lender on the side, a corresponding lender. So it's kind of like a broker. But I do that. Quite frankly, I did that just to offer a service to the client, the DPN clients that I represent. So
that's cool.
During COVID, I had a lot of folks that I know that were, they're my clients, and they said, Vince, I'm at 4%, and I'd say, let's see if I can save you some money monthly. And it makes sense because I see their income, and for the most part, I can see, pretty much get anything I need to get as far as from a income value, you know what I mean? To show like that they actually made the money. And so it seemed to be a puzzle piece that worked. I really do it as a side, just as a subsidiary as a benefit to DPN clients. So, but yeah, it's one of my many facets of services I provide.
Very cool.
Pretty neat. Pretty neat.
When you say clients, right? Your clients, tell us what that a client could mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But coming from Vince, talking about your clients, tell us what that means to you.
So, and Charles, I'm glad you brought this up. I think a lot of people don't understand, like, clients are the people I represent, right? Mm-hmm. As an agent, and any agent, I'm sure there's probably some that don't live to this standard, but from an ethical standpoint, I have a fiduciary responsibility to do what's right for my clients, right? For the people I represent. If it's right for them, it's right for me. And so from a negotiation standpoint or anything from just as far as a career management standpoint, I'm an agent, I'm not a manager, but, we are playing chess. We're not playing checkers. There may be a reason I don't send something to somebody because I know that could be their bread and butter, and I'm not going to conflict them with something that's not going to make a lot of money, right? Because I'm trying to look 3 or 4 or 5 steps ahead in the fact of like, hey, if in the next 6 months, could this woman get an audition that could be 2, 3, 4 times what I have in front of me? Probably. So I'm going to hold off on, you know what I mean? So I think with every client I have a, we go over kind of like obviously goals and stuff, but I think, and I talk about this in the class, everybody has their own vocal brand, right? So some clients, like I have a nickname for one of my clients, I call him a comfortable pair of jeans because he sounds like a comfortable pair of jeans when you listen to him. The stuff that he would be on would maybe be more blue collar or associated stuff that kind of has that like Lowe's, John Deere, there was a Reese's pipe coupling parts commercial that came out for like HVAC systems, like anything that has like this like blue collar, salt of the earth. I'm like I can be relatable on a working standpoint. I think I'm like, this fits your brand, and he agrees. And so when we go after, just like I say, the chess analogy, I'm not going to conflict him on something that might be a home improvement or might be even a John Deere or like a tractor service or there's so many different companies out there that could lean to his voice. And so we try to play chess in the fact of like, hey, if it's going to conflict him, maybe it's not that long of a conflict. If the money's right, then yeah, of course but it's a yin to the yang as far as like from, hey, Vince, what do you think? I'm like, hey, I think we should hold off, or I think this is great. I can read you on this. Maybe we can try to lower the term for what they're offering. And, again, this is all in the non-union world, but on the union side, it has the same thing. And so it's harder on the union side because you don't have the media buy up front. You don't know, right? It could just, you could just get a union. Internet spots are put on TV contracts. So at the end of the day, we could just think it's TV. Yeah, it's a producer said it's gonna be on TV. Well, no, it's on OTT and online pre-roll, right? And so online pre-roll, the union has recently changed. Now that's $25.50 a year, right? That's what that is compared to OTT, which, to clarify, is over the top. So over the top of the linear broadcast. So it's also known as CTV, which is connected television, i.e. Hulu TV, YouTube TV, Pluto TV. Anything that requires an internet connection to get your television is considered OTT, right? And so these values change, right? As far as like, that's a 56.25 per spot for OTT and 25.50. Well, the unions recently changed that to 25.50, which is just online pre-roll. So if you went to YouTube to look how to put a table together and you had to watch a commercial prior to seeing that video, that's what online pre-roll is. And they've recently changed that is they used to have to pay holding fees every 13 weeks to hold a conflict. Now they don't. So technically, if you were to just do a spot for internet, you could have, you think about it, you could have a retail, let's say retail, like Walgreens, right? Now you're conflicted. Troy's conflicted if he did that for $2,500 and he can't do CVS or anything else that would be, Walmart pharmacy, Costco pharmacy, or anything else that would have a pharmacy related retail store, right? So again, we're kind of going back to the chessboard on where does this person's voice lend towards, and where's their sweet spot vocally from a branding perspective. And that's what I kind of try to do with all my clients. I know we've stemmed off what the word client means, but that's truly it. And then on the opposite side of that would be buyers. So I have clients, they're voiceover clients, and then I have buyers, and buyers are people that come to me and I am the dot connector. So Vince, I have hey Vince, I have an audition. Can I get it back tomorrow? And a lot of these, whether it be casting folks, which casting folks are an additional middleman to that buyer, but buyers are production folks from ad agencies that are reaching out to me on a daily basis to get auditions.
Gotcha. Okay, so from that, so now that we've kind of got like the technical part of what a client is, what else do those clients mean to you? What kind of relationships do you have outside of like just business? Because I'm just going to say, like, looking on posts and DPN stuff, like I think you guys just had a big DPN get together picnic or something. And it was like a bajillion degrees outside, but everybody was still having fun. But you guys still did, as an agency, you guys as a family kind of did that. And I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, no, I mean, we do that every year. We have the DPN picnic and then the Christmas party. So those are the two times. I mean, we used to have so the agency was located in Beverly Hills, and pre-COVID, we would have everybody come in. We had booth directors we had 5 booths, 3 booth directors in 3 of those booths. And we would actually cast properly instead of like getting sending it out. You'd have, 35 people come into the agency and you'd read for that project. Now, can you imagine if you had 17 projects at once? The agency would just be, all day, it was just ongoing. And the reason we did that is for like a quality control standpoint. You have to think, coming in to read for something and getting direction from a booth director on the other side for a live audition is priceless. Because I can tell you, everybody who's listening to this podcast today knows how it feels to be in the booth on the other side at home, not having anybody to bounce ideas off of, and not knowing whether or not to send take 1, take 2, take 5, right? And organizing those by order. I've said it in my classes, but typically I like at least an A, B, and C, which would be 3 takes. If it's a shorter, if it's anything less than a 30-second, I prefer 3. That way you have to think, like, on the agency standpoint, when I'm receiving an audition, those booth directors still work for DPN. So, I may say, Dave, I love Charles's, the intro to his 3rd take. I like the tag off his first and the body of his middle. Let's make that his initial, like his actual submittable take. And, I might follow up with take 2 and take 1 as the 3rd. Right. And so now what have I done? I've created my own version of, I think, what I like, that, because everybody's, each take, you guys know, there's nuances that could change that may sound slightly different. And so I do that as obviously the talent is the quality control level 1, I'm quality control level 2, and then the booth director would be 3. So it's like, I listen to every audition that comes through, as all agents should. Any agent that I've heard horror stories of agents saying, "Oh, I have my assistant listen to those." Well, your assistant's he's not casting, right? So how do you know what your talent can do if you're not listening to their auditions?
Yeah,
You don't know if they've fallen into a rut or if they've gotten better or if you have no clue, right? And usually it takes a couple auditions, but I'll pick up the phone and say, "Hey, so and so, can we have a chat?" And they're like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "So the last 2 auditions, this is an example. I see this is a habit that's starting to form. I want you to change this, maybe take a class, but we don't want to get into this rut, right?" And so to try to have talent be conscious of like, "Hey, I don't, because how do you know if nobody tells you? You don't.
True.
You just keep on submitting. And especially if you do fall into a little bit of a rut or a habit forming that's not good, like, you want to be able to shake that. And I think I have clients that make over $1 million a year and they take classes still. As I always say, even doctors need to see physicians, right? So you have to, this is an ongoing process of honing your craft, and that honing never stops.
Yeah.
Very
Agree
true.
with that 100%.
Very true. Yeah, I've heard top level talent and say several times that they weren't, and they are teachers and coaches saying, "I was not practicing what I was preaching with my auditions. I became an audition machine." And it can happen. You can lose touch, you can lose context, you can lose your connection to your copy. You had to be very careful with that. It's very true.
And especially, Troy, if you're a hat trick player, meaning you're getting an animation audition, maybe 2 promo auditions and a few commercial auditions that day, what are you doing when, and when do you have time to gear switch? Right. Are these auditions bleeding over into one another? Right. And
for
so
sure.
there's a fine line there. And I think I've always said it too, like what separates good VO talent to great VO talent is gear switching.
Absolutely.
The ability to not have to do back-to-back auditions in separate facets of VO and not have anything bleed over. It's incredibly hard to do. And those are the ones that you always can say, all right, well, yeah, this is why he makes the money he does, because he's able to produce that sound and not, still adhere to deadlines, because everybody knows this business it used to be 2 days I'd have time on. Now it's sometimes 2 hours I get. So it's crazy.
Yeah, I lost a gig last week on vacation. They'd sent an email on Thursday, wanted to record this week. My out of office was real clear that said, "I'll be back on Friday night." But they didn't read past the subject line of out of office. It was just out of office. He's not there. We're going to our second choice. And I understood, it didn't break my heart, but I did, I wanted to reply back and say, "Hey, sorry, I thought I was clear in my out of office." And, the lesson learned for me is next time, maybe I don't do out of office because I'm checking email anyway. So anyway, hardly.
It's hard though. Everybody needs to have a break, and it's, it's things. And the fact is nobody reads anything. It's so hard. I had a lot of people. I was gone for 2 weeks for that VO retreat, but I had taken a week prior, and believe me, there was a lot of buyers that reached out. They're like, we've emailed Vince 4 times. And I'm like, well, his out of office. Did you
Read the out of office message. He's not going back for 3 more weeks.
It's fallen into my junk or whatever it is. So I try to be as clear as possible on that type of stuff. But yeah, I mean, if you're checking it anyway, that's probably, that's something to say, all right, well, I can just flag some of these things and respond as such. I know it's hard in this business because you're always chasing that next gig, and especially if you don't have an agent, or that job didn't come through an agent, it came direct.
Right.
It's like you're playing you're playing good cop and bad cop. You know what I mean? And that's sometimes extremely hard, especially from a negotiation standpoint.
I'm hearing more and more this year, Vince, that people that are seeking representation are hitting more brick walls than they would have hit a year ago or 3 years ago. And with the influx of so many people coming into this, so many people having access, so many who are going out and getting the learning and education and coaching, is that what you're, can you back that up a little bit, or give us some info on how that looks for you?
Yeah. I mean, when I started, there was I mean, we're talking 11, almost 12 years ago. And to see the talent pool that was available then, granted, nobody really had a home studio. Everybody was going into the agency to record. You had to get sent to a professional studio. Ad agencies had that in their budget. But you have to think the amount of influx year over end that this business has taken in, the amount of talent. There's so many good talent nowadays. The amount of people that are doing this at a high level is exponentially higher year over end. So it's every year I come to see that, even some of these folks that I get probably 85 submission emails a week. And so it's extremely hard for me. If I answered all of them, I wouldn't be able to do my job, right? Mm-hmm. So I put them into a submissions email folder. I try to respond to everybody within a 30 or 60-day time because it is hard. But how do you sift through all of that to maybe even find one or two really good talent, Right. And what I've come to pick up is some of these folks that, some of these newer talent that are only in the business for a year or two, they don't have any bad habits, right? Because they're new to voiceover. And so you have to think it's a curse and a blessing sometimes to have an account for so long, because if you have an account subconsciously, if you're making money off one thing and you're doing one style of read, and this is true to be for affiliate stuff, anything that's going to be hard-handed type of, especially in the promo affiliate world. I've had guys on affiliate accounts and I'm like, yo, you better be making good money off that because this is bleeding over in your commercial reads, But yeah, I do see a lot of really good talent, and it's hard as an agent because, you never want to have the FOMO of like, oh, I let that person go. And then, they go on to book the next big thing. But, it truly is hard. I'd rather have less people on my roster and be able to service them properly than just take on the world. Right. And then not just be spread so thin that I can't properly do my job. And that's really the fact is. And I tell people too, I think your reads are great. I think you're going to get picked up like if they're good, I'll have no problem hopping on the line and telling them you should apply here. This is where you should send your stuff to see if they would represent you because you have the sound. But I would be doing you a disservice if I took you on. Right. I don't need 12 hammers in the same shed. And so
exactly.
That's it,
Yeah.
It makes sense. Yeah. And it's not fair to the current roster. And I think a lot of people are starting to get the realization that and understand it. That's why you see the huge push for so many people going after, corporate work and other types of work. You can still make a living at this without having all of that. You can. I mean, some of us are proof of that. It may not be a huge living. It may not be $1 million living, but you can make $100,000, $150,000 pretty easily.
Which you have to think your average corporate paying entry level job is going to be between that 100 to 200K or 60 to 200K range, depending on what area of the country you're in. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You're making $150,000 and you're living in, Kansas City. You're doing all right.
Right. Yeah. For sure.
From a economical standpoint, in that bracket, that's the cost of living, But like Troy, let's follow up on the fact of how many other agencies now that used to not work on VO, all of a sudden now offer a VO roster and are getting into voiceover, right? So you have all these on-camera agencies, modeling and print, and all these other companies that are now coming out of the woodwork to be representatives. And I think it's great, but it's also there's a lot of snakes in the grass per se, right? And so, and anybody listening to this, there's state laws against, since every state law is different, but California has a state law that really diffuses any situation as far as people overtaking too much compensation, right? And I've seen some recent contracts out of Florida and Middle America that some of these folks are taking 40%, and so just know that that's crook. That's not allowed in our business. If it's non-union, 20% is standard. If it's union, 10% is only allocated. That's only what's allowed. And again, that boils back down to if it's right for the talent, it's right for me. That's how that relationship works. I've seen some bad contracts come through, and I've seen some stuff where the representative just wants to push this person on this job and it's a bad paying job, but it's got volume to it. And they know that that rep knows that they're going to make some commission off of it. So they're willing to do it. But I think the power of, as a talent, the power of the word no really has a lot of benefit. And the fact is just vet those agents. So when you're like reaching out to agents for representation, you want to be weary of people that are taking 20% on top of they're taking the plus 20 and then 20% of gross of your talent fee, because that's illegal. That's not right. So, but yeah, I just threw that out there because I know that there's many great reps there are. There's also a lot, there's a yin to the yang out there. So just everyone just be, I know everyone's eager to have representation, but it's about having the right person behind you that's going to make your career.
Absolutely.
Since we're on the topic of rates, so let's say you're doing non-union work and you're negotiating rates on your own. That in itself can be a slippery slope because there's work that is worth more than that, but then there's also bills to pay, and there's maybe you just want to book something. When you're starting out, you just want to book something. You want to feel validated, like, man, I did a spot. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Because I surely was there when I first started. I mean, I was making my own lunch and eating it. I mean, I was making nothing. So what are some of the things that people should look out for? And even though it's tough, they should either stick to their guns, or how do you fight that? How do you fight that battle?
I think you also have to look at conflicts, and we can talk about tracking your conflicts and how to do that. But people that track their conflicts also are data mining their career, right? So if you every month go through and say, let's say you've booked 2 things that month, and the following month you say, all right, this is the other, over a course of how many years, you're going to go back and say, well, guess what? My sweet spot's wireless. I've done more wireless spots in the last 4 years, right? So I think really it's more so about where your brand lands, and to not conflict that in an area. Because if they're going to offer you no money for something that is your sweet spot, that's kind of a problem, because at the end of the day, it's like, hey, and conflicting, let's talk about this. Like when people come to you and they don't have the money, well, then what can they, where do you minimize that box? There's always an area to push in, right? All right, well, no problem. I can offer you a lesser term, right? Mm-hmm. So then you can, you combat that. If you can always combat a negotiation with something outside of the relative fact of money, right? So if they only have so much money, I can, instead of 6 deliverables, I can offer you 3. Or I can offer you, instead of a year, I can do 8 months on this. And so you're negotiating it from a different standpoint. And I think, knowing your worth, because it's hard because like you said, sometimes you want to get on a spot. But I mean, tracking, how do you pull, my biggest thing is pulling emotion out of negotiations, right? How do you do that, right? So everybody should have, and the TV rates are a subsidiary of that, but the biggest, the most frequently used term in voiceover right now is digital. Well, digital is such a gray area, right? You could have, we just talked about it, online pre-roll. You could have social media spots, paid social spots. You could have digital industrial, which might just be the company website, right? Or OTT, which is basically television. If you can walk to your living room, turn on the TV, and that spot comes through, it's close to linear broadcast, right? And SAG didn't do the best job at pricing out that per spot rate at $56.25, because if you had something running for 1 year, even on let's say regionally, you could make $40,000. You know what I mean? Off that spot. So, I mean, at the end of the day, what I want you guys to do is start to combat with percentages, right? That's my biggest trick, and I'll give that on this podcast. And I know, Charles, you've heard this in my class, but for instance, if you're offered $400 for something, what you do is you take the offered rate and you divide it by the market rate. So $400, let's say on $2,550 is what? 15.9%. So you turn around and say, so-and-so, I'm really looking forward to working with you. I definitely want to do this job, but right now you're only offering me 16% what I'd normally make in this category. Is there any way to come up to 35%? And you do that math backwards to figure out what 35% is. And then you can easily say, hey, also a lot of these producers don't realize that they're lowballing you. A lot of these guys are going on these platforms like Voices 123 because their boss told them, handle the voiceover. We've shot the on camera. We've done it all. We need to now get a guy to tag this spot out. And so they put that thing out. They put it out with their budget, or they're fishing. Maybe they have $7,000 for the budget, but they put it out at $2,500. So just know that as much as you guys want that job, they need somebody to fill that position. So coming back and saying, the negotiation really starts at no, technically. So turn around and say, hey guys, I really want to work with you. I think my vocal brand is going to lend to this campaign perfectly. But right now you're only offering me this percentage of what I normally would make. What can we do where can we meet to make this work? And so again, you can, if it's the money thing, right, you negotiate on the other end. The amount of deliverables is that's called a triggering term, deliverables, not spots. Because you could have spots with 60, with
16 deliverables,
a 30, a 15, a 6, a 10, and a 20. Now you have 5 plus the additional core. You're doing 6. So if you have 3 cores times 6 each, where are we at that point, right? So 18 deliverables at this point.
Yeah, I really like the percentage because when you say, if you tell anybody $450, like $450 just not in voice or just $450, that's a lot of money. So people automatically think like, well, that's pretty good, $450. But if you say, well, that's only like 11.5% of what I can actually make, they're gonna be like, wow, it's only 11%. It's barely over 10%. Dude, I'm sorry. Let me see what I could do. Like, that's exactly because they just don't get that vision. They don't know the difference. Right. It's just a money number.
And I've had producers where I'm like, this is only 17%. I'm like, Scott, if I told you you're only going to make 17% of your salary this week, would you go to work still? And he's like, so you turn that around and it's easier when it's somebody else doing it for you, right? Because then that agent's your bulldog, right? It's like, hey, and it allows the talent to play good cop. So walking that line is so hard, but I think doing it with a smile on your face and just saying, hey, it's only 9%. What can we do? You know what I mean? Is there anywhere and also it sheds light on the fact that these are the normal rates. So if you're quoting a SAG rate really quick, you're already quoting 40% less than what it would normally be, right? So if you were to take 5625 plus 20% pension and health plus 20% SIG fees, you're at roughly $7,900. So you have to think if you're quoting 5625 or $5,500, right, to make it an even round number for an OTT spot, and say, and obviously there's room to work, right? If they have these cut downs, are they mechanical? Are they read in the session? Are they mechanically derived from that core and post? Or am I going to be reading these while I'm in the session? And so you can charge, people sometimes just throw those in, but hey, I'll do $5,000 for the core and let's just make it easy. Just $500 per additional cut. As long as visually the spot's the same. Right? If the 30 is on a different spot visually, well, guess what? It's a different spot now. You know what I mean?
Right.
So these are triggering questions. Are the visuals the same on the spot? Are they the cut downs done in post, or am I reading them in the session? All these trigger terms are you getting information as the talent back and computing it to say, all right, great, I can do this. Or, no problem, I'll throw these in. You only have a couple cut downs. Give me $5,000, call it a day. And also separating the session cost. A lot of people don't do that. Like, what if you have a pickup session? As nothing's been established.
Right.
So exactly. If standard is $500 per 2 hours, $250 per 30 minutes. Any additional sessions after that are $250 per 30 minutes for pickups. It's a low rate. It's not a lot. It's a couple $100. They should be that should be an easy thing. I mean, and guys, look at the SAG, the SAG rates, the SAG book. Those rates are considered SAG scale, which is bottom of the barrel. So I know it's even quoting a SAG rate, but from a digital standpoint, they only have an 4-week an 8-week, a 13-week, and a 1-year option. They're corridoring you to go to the 1-year option because the even on on digital or on OTT, it's like $2,000 for 13 weeks. Well, if you at 26 weeks, you're at $4,000. For another $1,600, I can get another 26 weeks. So they're purposely doing that. So if you're pricing things out, try to scale that out the same way. With time and volume comes discount. So if people are offering you more spots, you can give them a better per spot rate. Just like the same thing, if they're going to offer you a 10-year option, guess what? That 10-year rates, that 10-year number is a lot bigger, but their per spot per year rates drastically lower.
Sure.
However, in perpetuity should never exist. Forever is a long time, so I think there's a lot of ways to combat rates and negotiate so that you feel comfortable. But again, if it's something like non-union automotive is something that nobody should be doing unless it's if it's a local dealership, it should be like if it's tier like C stuff, you should be it all should be on rate and term. 4 weeks, it expires, you're back to the conflict free. I had a woman who did a tag for a 3 dealership company, and there was no term. They just assumed they could continue to use it. And, I had to reach out to them and say, hey guys, and they're like, well, we don't have anything in writing. I was like, so therefore you need to stop airing it tomorrow, but if they would have came back and said, hey, we have an in perpetuity deal for no money, it could have been the worst skeleton in her closet because she can't read on a Ford National TV spot, which could make her, $100,000 more, or become the voice of a brand. You imagine becoming a voice of an automotive brand, you can make 7 digits a year. So again, playing chess with your career, you want to, instead of the quick fix, you want to look at like, hey, am I, in 2 years, I'm going to be better in voiceover than I am now. Or in 5 years, I could be the national voice of an account. Be careful. Everything should have a rate and a term. You don't want to conflict yourself,
I think the thing that I get from what you just said was you have to educate yourself because you can't go into these things blind. You can't go into them with fear running the show or, some kind of emotion running the show. I like what you said in the beginning. Negotiations you kind of have to take the emotion out of it because it's like we're talking numbers. We're talking tick for tack. I'm doing this for this. You're giving me this for that. And that, and now we've come to this agreement. And then, but you can add in, like you said, you want to do it with a smile. Be like, man, I'd really love to work with you and this and that. Let's work something out. How about this? Does this sound okay? Or what could you offer to meet me a little more in the middle?
And desperation is picked up so quickly, especially on the phone. And people know that, they'll know right away if they're going to be able to hammer you and get that rate. And quite frankly, the biggest things I've had in the past is like I've even had some people, they send me auditions and I'll hop on the phone and have a discussion and say, hey, like where I'm looking at for the usage you want for this conflict area that this is running in, this should cost $30,000 or whatever it may be, right? And then they come back and they're like, well, I only have 7,500. Well, we're eons away right now. We're galaxies apart. But I'm going to do one thing and read. I'll sometimes read one talent. Say this is what $30,000 sounds like. Or this is what $25,000 sounds like. And as an agent, if I have the talent caliber to back up that my numbers, well then, and that's the same thing. I think knowing your worth and saying, hey, I've invested a lot of time in classes. I've spent 12 hours a day in the booth or whatever it may be. I know I'm worth this. And sometimes it's only a couple $100 or a couple $1,000 difference to make that deal work. But don't be afraid to ask and don't be afraid to say, hey, like that's why the percentages work great. You're not saying no, but you're not saying yes. And you're just saying, hey, this is some black and white information on what your price, where we're at. It also makes that individual, the voice talent, seem more professional. Your business, right? You're
100%.
Right.
100%.
This is what I normally make. again, you also have to remind these people, these producers, this is not a hobby. I do this to put food on my table, and this is how I make a living, right? You're not doing this as a, you've retired and you're on the back nine of your life here, just trying to make a couple bucks. This is something that you do to feed your family. And I try to reiterate that to a lot of producers as well. In this negotiation, sometimes I'm like, hey, everybody on my roster is professional. Nobody is doing this as a subsidiary situation to make a couple dollars. Everyone does this as professionals to make money. And so I tried to reiterate that, because a lot of people sometimes don't. They're like, oh, it's just voiceover. Well, no, it's the last thing I try to tell producers, it's the last thing that your clients that your client's consumer is going to hear before they go and buy your product.
Yep. Right.
So, it's like, it's an important part of that commercial.
Yeah.
And yeah, you have to think that 9 times out of 10, you will, as a consumer, you are more likely to remember a jingle, a tagline, off of a commercial than you would the visuals. Right.
Oh yeah.
You have to think how many things over time. The Empire commercial, for example, has run since the 80s. It's been the same commercial, and that jingle. I mean, I can't tell you. I could just phrase it off the top of my head. So it's like there's so many things. You guys have to just remember that these just know your worth, and being professional and knowing that from a mathematical standpoint of what you should stand to make correctly is also it lets that person know you're here for business,
Yeah. And the resources are out there. And Charles, we do this all the time, back and forth. We're on Messenger or texting each other. I've got this client, they want this. I'm looking at this. Will you double check me? We do that a lot because we're used to it. We're used to looking at the rates and doing it. And we encourage people in our Facebook group, if you don't know, ask or text one of us and we'll try to help you through it. We don't want anybody getting ripped off or cheaping out. It's too important. We don't want to price the basement when you should be making the penthouse. Just don't do it. It's tough, but don't do it.
And honestly, it affects all of us.
It does. Right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
This is why I've opened up the curtain, pulled back the curtain on what I do a little bit as far as negotiation standpoint, and some of my tricks is because, quite frankly, it helps me in the long run, because then if I'm quoting a rate and everybody else can even use, like maybe if out of the 100 people that saw my thing in Dallas, if I had 10 of them turn around and become better negotiators, that creates a snowball effect in our market. And our market's a lot smaller than everyone perceives it to be. And, at the end of the day, I think if we uphold our rates, we're going to be okay. It's like, the problem with voiceover is, gas costs more every year, milk costs more every year. Why doesn't voiceover rates cost more, right?
Absolutely.
We can't continue to go down. And I think us as a community upholding one another to help set that precedence and keep things where they need to be so we can all thrive is so incredibly important.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's ever since I started, I kind of made that change into saying no, or saying, well, let's see what else we can do. That brought something out of me, because it was, in the beginning, it was controlled by fear. Oh, I don't want to lose this job. I don't want to lose this $1,200. That's a lot of money, And once I got to that point where I was like, okay, the numbers don't look right to me, but I'm going to start talking about it with people and be a little bit more, have it in my mind that it's okay to not get this. Once I started doing that, dude, I'm telling you, things change, because now you are starting to make more money, right? Your confidence comes out. Like you said, they're like, oh, this guy's a professional. Like, okay, this is what he does. He's not gonna take the first, breadcrumb that I throw out there. And sure, I've lost many jobs because the rate wasn't right, but I've made so much more money for jobs that offered so much, and I got more because I kind of looked at what the rates were, this and that, talked about this and that, and they're happy. They're like, okay, like we got that amount for you. Hey, you know what? Let me check back. Hey, they still want to go with you. They said this rate's okay. And then you're like, send it to me on paper. Like, hey, I'll sign it. Whatever you need to sign, let's go.
That's
and
it.
and then they've come back to me as repeat clients. And it all stems from not being afraid, because like you said, they'll hear it a mile away. They're gonna be like, oh, this is a dude we could whoop, no problem.
Yep.
And then now it's this confidence that comes with it, and you just start stepping up and stepping up and stepping up.
It truly is it's so true. That even from an agent's perspective, out of 10 projects, non-union projects, I probably turned down 6 of them. To be honest with you, I turned on so much work because at the end of the day, some stuff just isn't worth my time or my talent's time. And I think over the course of time of doing that, I've come to have producers that will reach out to me only when they have bigger budgets, which is really what I'd prefer anyway, And so I always say too, there's 2 ways to make money. You can catch 1,000 bluegill a day off the pier to feed the village, or you can go offshore fishing and catch 1 whale. What do you want to do? You know what I mean? And so it's like, hey, this is a volume business. It truly is, but also it's knowing, that if you're putting your voice on something, it's putting your stamp as a voice actor on that, and you're bringing value to their production, and knowing that worth. And Charles, it's so true from a psychological standpoint. You're more willing to say no, which inevitably people want you even more from that, right? There's a psychological thing to that too, where they're like, oh, this guy said no, but we don't want to have to go recast. Let's just offer him what, he came back at this number. We can meet him there. Let's just do this thing and make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
And they're also a lot of times on a time crunch. So
yeah,
you can go recast 1,000 times over. All that costs is time and money for them.
Yeah, it's probably going to cost them more to recast, have everybody back in a session. Now they're hiring their audio engineer because it's a third party. They're getting the client back on a call again. And that probably looks bad to them because the client's probably like, well, I thought you guys had this controlled. What kind of production company you're running here? They don't want any of that stigma. So they're like, let's go, man.
Yeah.
What do I always say? It's the good tattoos aren't cheap and cheap tattoos aren't good.
That's true.
So,
That's true. Very true. How was the Euro retreat? You took the family, right?
It was great. Yeah, we got some time away, and my little 6-month-old already has 2 passport stamps now. So it was truly those retreats are so deep, right? Like I always say, there's the Dallas and Atlanta are great, but those. You truly are spending so much. You're spending, a week's time with a consolidated 14, 15, 16 people, right? And you're diving in at a level that, Charles took my 3-hour and we covered a lot, but you have to think if I had 3 of those classes consecutively, the amount of stuff that you're able to cover and to really dive in not only on reads, but from a business standpoint and, tracking conflicts and just all from an organizational standpoint. One of my classes, I basically just talked about, what agents are looking for. Like if you're, having that organized business on your end to be able to have more representation or to level up on representation. I mean, you're just able to dive so deep into the topics that everybody really wants to talk about, and so for a week straight. And so it's really those things. I feel when we as the presenters leave, we're all connected from that group. I've even had guys, people from Spain, which I did in 2022. Still reach out to me to ask me stuff. And I'm like, hey, because everyone's truly friends at the end of it all. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, absolutely.
They are super fun, and it's always cool to go, abroad and see other countries and stuff. So yeah, we had a blast.
Cool. Very cool.
And it's really cool that you got to go with your family and Juju got to go too. So that was pretty cool, man.
Little Julian. Yeah.
I can't believe
I could tell my wife, like, going to Europe for 2 weeks.
I can't believe how big he's gotten. Like just from following social media and stuff. It's like that kid's growing like
it's crazy,
weed, man.
He'll be 7 months in a week, and it's so wild to me. So
it's crazy.
Yeah. You blink your eyes, and believe me, I've been there. They are graduated and married, and you're like, what the heck? So enjoy the heck out of it. I enjoyed my kids so much when they were small. And of course, when they turn 14, 15, they don't want to hang out with you a lot anyway, for some reason. But man, when they were small, it's just everywhere I went. Now, can I go with you, Dad? Can I go with you, Dad? And I never said no matter what I was doing. You know, I'd drag them along and let them go. And it's a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun.
Really quick, you know, we're coming up on almost an hour, and I know you got to get back. Troy's got to get back. I got to get back. Before we go, just so people know, Vince LeBica, like, is there something like a hobby or something like that of yours, or something that, I don't know, maybe a lot of people don't know about, that's like just your thing?
I mean, really, I'm like an open book. You could just figure out that just by being on my social media, but I love surfing. I live near the beach. And really, to be honest with you, it's like, I love voiceover, but outside of that, really I'm a very simple guy. I love being by the water, and I love hanging with my family. And I have buddies that are all kind of within the same area. And we just, you know, I get to surf in the mornings with them usually. And quite frankly, it's that, and as of late, become more of like a foodie, trying like new foods and that type of stuff. And just kind of just enjoying the time. Like Troy just said, like, I've really, since I've had a son, I've really tried to slow life down as fast as much as I could, because it goes by so fast.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so by trying to really like soak up the time, because when I'm working, I'm the guy that like I'm 110% on. But when the problem for so long for me was when I was off or on the weekends, I would still have one foot in the office. And I think now it's, even my wife's done a really, really great job of that, of just telling me like, you need to be just more present. And I've done that. And it really, what it does is like slow down the moments that you know, the ones that you're going to look back and say, oh my God, I wish I could relive that. Especially when with a little guy, it's like he's already, you know, he starts daycare on Friday, which is wild. That we've kept him this 7 months almost, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, quite frankly, I'm like, you know, there's a lot of time that it's like, since from now to then, or from when he was born to now, it's like I've really just been trying to, when I am away from the office, I'm 100% giving that time to them. So it's been cool, and you know, it is pretty wild on how crazy and fast, because I blink of an eye, right?
Yeah.
So
what's his first Halloween costume going to be?
So he's going to be, he's got like a full bear suit, and I have a Chicago Bears cut off shirt that I'm going to put over the top. So he's like a bear, as a Bears fan.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
Me and Kel we have bear ears, and we're just going to wear some Chicago Bears gear and just kind of like go as the Bears. So
that's good.
That's right?
Good. I like that's a good and original. Cool. I like that
for sure.
Yeah,
very cool.
I'm doing grown up Charlie Brown.
That's right. Oh, all right. How about you, Charles?
My wife and I, we went to a Halloween/birthday party in our costume. We just put black eye makeup on one eye, and then we had white T-shirts, and we put big giant peas on the shirts. And people are like, "What are you guys?" And we're the Black Eyed Peas.
I love it.
Gosh.
I love it. Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, guys, thank you so much for having me, and it's been awesome. And we can do it again. We can for sure do it again. So, if we do it again next time, maybe we switch it up and we can dive into like I know this was very organic this time, and I know I just kind of went off on the rails a few times.
It's all right, man. It's all right.
But please, if you guys have something coming up and want me to, you know, even me and maybe a casting director or something like that, we can do some sort of where it'd be cool to have us kind of go over the process or whatever you think would be valuable to the listeners, man. I'm here for it. So
we'd love it. We'd love it.
Awesome.
Well, we want to thank everybody for tuning in. For myself, for Charles Coates, and for Vince LeBica, thank you guys so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week on another. No, it's not another. It's the VO Life. I can't remember. We'll see you next time on the VO Life.
This has been the VO Life with Troy Holden on Spotify, Apple, Google, and more.